Jesus, please, my brother killed my brother. I heard the street name. What's your brother?
The alarming 911 call to emergency services highlighted the tragic situation experienced by the Miller family, who reside in Florida, United States. We invite you to stay until the end of this video, the Nat Miller case. Before we begin, we ask you to subscribe and activate the bell to receive all the notifications. Don't forget to leave your like so I can continue creating content. Without further ado, let's analyze together all the details of this criminal story. Nat Miller was born on October 12, 1990, in the small community of Pala in San Diego County, California. He was the second child of Elizabeth and Sam Miller, who had already had Samuel for 2 years. In total, Elizabeth and Sam had 6 children from previous relationships, but only Jen and Lauren are known by name. They lived on the other coast of the United States, Florida. The Miller family settled in a rented house in San Diego, where Nat and Samuel enjoyed a childhood filled with love and joy from a young age. Nat made everyone around him feel lucky to have him in their lives. For Elizabeth, her youngest son, Nat represented a breath of fresh air, which fostered a strong bond between them. This led to family jokes about his supposed preference. Although these were only harmless comments, despite the distance, the older children also loved their little brother very much. Due to Sam's busy schedules and Elizabeth's commitment to her work and church, Nat and Samuel spent much of their time alone at home after school. Their relationship was generally harmonious, although, as with any brotherly bond, there was no shortage of disagreements and the typical jokes between siblings. Over time, Nat displayed an outgoing personality that contrasted with his parents' reserve, while they maintained a certain distance from the neighbors. Nat stood out for his social skills. Thus, he befriended Mary, a neighbor, a single mother of 2 daughters who shared his love of animals. Mary's house, filled with goats, horses, chickens, and sheep, became a second home for Nat, who enjoyed helping care for them. Over time, they formed an almost familial relationship, exploring San Diego's scenic overlooks together. However, in 2005, when Nat was 15 and in high school, he learned that his house was going to be sold. Despite Elizabeth and Sam's efforts to find an affordable place, they were unsuccessful. This led them to make an important decision, to move to Florida, to be near Elizabeth's elderly mother, whose health had worsened. Although the move represented a big change, the couple decided to accept Sam's mother's offer to move to a property of hers in Spring Hill. Nat felt his heart break upon learning that he would be leaving California. He was against it. He moved and asked his parents if he could stay with Mary. However, his parents, who loved him, preferred to keep him close. In August 2005, the family moved to Spring Hill, a quiet place in Hernando County. They settled into a house with a large yard. Both siblings enrolled in a local high school, while Elizabeth and Sam found jobs at Grace Presbyterian Church, where Elizabeth worked in the daycare center and Sam was the custodian. Nat and Samuel adapted well to the new neighborhood and school, making new friends, like Christian, their neighbor with whom they enjoyed long afternoons playing video games. They also met Samantha, a girl from Florida, who quickly became close friends with the siblings, despite all the new developments. Nat missed Mary and kept in touch with her, expressing his desire to reunite. Soon, his dream was to return to California once he finished his studies in May 2006. Samuel surprised his parents by announcing that he was dropping out of school. He preferred to learn martial arts and collect swords, and began hanging out with troubled kids in the neighborhood. This led to his arrest in 2007 on felony fraud-related charges. Although the charges were later dropped, a neighbor described him as fun-loving, but a compulsive liar and thief, noting that his low self-esteem led him to make up stories for Lauren, one of his older sisters. Samuel was a talented musician with a high IQ, which sometimes made him appear arrogant. At the end of the summer, when Samuel got into trouble, other bad news hit the family. Nat also dropped out of school. Although his parents feared he would follow the same path as Samuel, Nat had a different perspective and didn't want to be inactive. He got a job at a restaurant, but his health deteriorated, leading him to miss school frequently and finally quit the job the following year. Nat contracted encephalitis, which put him in a coma for more than 40 days. According to his sister Lauren, doctors in Tampa reported white lesions on his brain and doubted his survival. Survival. However, his parents clung to the hope that he would wake up. and so it happened when Nat finally woke up. He had lost 20 kilograms and was weakened, forcing him to relearn many skills and undergo therapy. During this difficult process, his family, especially Elizabeth, Sam and Samuel, provided constant support. Thanks to them, Nat was able to fully recover. Within a year, however, the stress and anguish affected his mother, who began to suffer from heart problems. For Nat, this experience revitalized his desire to continue his studies and allowed him to find solace in faith. According to friends and family, he seemed to have gained a new perspective on life, valuing every moment and prioritizing relationships. In the summer of 2009, he decided he was ready to travel to California and reunite with Mary. Upon arriving at his old home, the joy was immense. He took the opportunity to share his aspirations and future plans with Mary. He asked for her help, cover the costs of his high school equivalency exams, and told her about his dream of becoming a physical therapist. Although he needed resources to achieve it together, they began looking for loans and grants. Nat assumed the right thing to do was to return to California and told his mother. However, she felt it wasn't the right time to have him away, especially after everything they had been through. Since he needed medical attention, he wouldn't be able to get it outside of Florida. Elizabeth asked him to come back, which was a painful moment for Nat. Before saying goodbye, he promised Mary he would return next summer. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, an attraction began to develop between Nat and Samantha. Both brothers were attracted to her. In early May 2010, Samuel and Nat exchanged text messages with Samantha to get her attention. Finally, it was Samuel who invited her. Samantha gladly accepted, and they spent the summer together. A lovely evening at the end of the night, they kissed from that moment on. Samuel claimed he was in a relationship with her, but Samantha soon realized that his true interest was Nat. They began dating exclusively, not wanting to hurt Samuel or create enmity. To clear the air, they told Samuel about their relationship. This was a shock to him. Since then, a notable tension arose between the siblings, to the point that they argued at home in front of their parents. To avoid further conflict, Nat and Samantha decided to keep their love a secret. However, this only fueled Samuel's illusions, who, blinded by jealousy, sent messages to Samantha, warning her that Nat's intentions were not good, and that she only wanted to play with his feelings. On June 17, 2010, Nat told Samuel that her relationship with Samantha was continuing and that her intentions were serious. Samuel took the news with apathy. Although inside, he felt a considerable anger erupted the next day, unconcerned about his older brother's opinion. Nat arranged a date with Samantha. They spent much of the day together, and he took the opportunity to open up and share his true feelings. In the early hours of June 19, 2010, they said goodbye upon arriving home. Nat went up to his room and locked the door. Samuel approached stealthily, holding a rope, and forced the lock. In a matter of seconds, what had begun as a conversation, or rather a confrontation, about his relationship with Samantha, turned into an intense argument. Suddenly, the two found themselves struggling. Samuel put the rope around Nat's neck. According to his story, in the midst of the struggle, they fell to the ground, but as he collapsed, Nat suffered a blow to the neck. Horrified, Samuel approached him and felt his younger brother's body. He was without vital signs. Samuel had the idea of digging a hole in the garden with his bare hands. He then pulled the body out through the bedroom window and placed it in the grave while trying to cover it with dirt. Elizabeth woke up to noises coming from outside and went over to investigate. Seeing her son, she asked what Samo was doing. Samo explained that he was getting rid of some of Samantha's belongings because he didn't want her in his life. Satisfied with her answer, Elizabeth walked away, and Samo continued covering the hole, planning to move the body. 2 weeks later, when her parents were out, he immediately went up to her room, took Nat's phone, and pretended to be him. He sent 3 text messages to Samantha, informing her that he no longer wanted to continue the relationship. Around 9:30 a.m., when the girl woke up and read the messages, she felt confused. Considering the previous night, it seemed absurd to her. Nat said that. Shortly after, Samuel sent a message to Samantha from his own phone without pretending to be his brother, asking her to call him. When she did, she told him that Nat had packed her things and left for California just before ending the call. She added that the atmosphere at home was calmer. Later that day, Sam went to the Miller's house to collect some of her belongings. While they were talking in his car, Samuel confessed that he loved her and suggested that with Nat's departure, Maybe they could rekindle their relationship. They shared a long kiss, and then she left. On Sunday, June 20th, 2010, Elizabeth celebrated her birthday, which fell on Father's Day, which seemed like a good opportunity for a double celebration. However, neither Elizabeth nor Sam could fully enjoy it. They tried calling him but got no answer. Instead, they both received text messages from him. Not only was it unusual that he didn't answer, but the content of the messages didn't seem like Nat. Suddenly, Sam and Elizabeth began to fear the worst. The next day, Monday, June 21st, June 2010, Jennifer visited the family home, Tosk. If there was any news about Nat. During her conversation with Elizabeth, she mentioned the strange hole that had appeared in the yard. Not fully understanding what Jennifer was suggesting or asking her father to investigate. As he began to dig, Sam found himself with Nat's arms and legs. Panic gripped him, and he burst into screams of horror as he put together the pieces of the macabre puzzle. Jennifer called emergency services. On the other end of the line, a dispatcher named Jessica tried to understand the situation, but the combination of Jennifer's trembling voice and Sam's screams complicated her task. Meanwhile, Elizabeth ran to find Samuel and found him sitting, sobbing and apologizing, repeating that it had all been an accident. Jennifer tried to convince the dispatcher that it was urgent to send the police, fearing that Samuel could have hurt them too. After a harrowing 7-minute phone call, the police finally arrived. Upon entering, they found the father on his knees, digging on the ground with his hands and lifting Nate's arm from the hole. Officers ordered him to stop, but he continued. Then, an officer grabbed his arm and pulled him away. Shortly after, Elizabeth came down from the room with Samuel, who was hugging Heron, a supportive gesture. At that moment, he was arrested. During the subsequent interrogation, he offered different versions of what happened. Initially, he told investigators that Nat could have been murdered due to drug problems and debt. He then claimed that he entered his brother's room one morning and found him trying to take his own life. Although he tried to stop him, he couldn't. As a result, Samuel decided to hide the body to spare his mother. However, after about 2 hours and under pressure from the officers, he finally confessed the truth, revealing that the argument had been provoked by Samantha. At 10:30 p.m. on the same Monday, Samuel was booked into the Hernando County Jail on second-degree murder charges and was to remain there without bail for 2 days. Dr. Barbara Wolfe performed Nat's autopsy. Her forensic report indicated that although bleeding was observed in the muscle under the skin of his neck, suggesting he had been restrained in that area to prevent him from breathing, the cause of death was head and neck trauma. To determine whether the case warranted first or second-degree charges, the assistant state's attorney carefully reviewed the evidence. In a worst-case scenario, Samuel could face the death penalty. However, a second-degree charge could lead to life in prison. After hearing testimony on April 12, 2013, a jury composed of 9 women and 3 men. The men deliberated for 2 hours, and Med concluded that there was no planning involved in the crime. Thus, Samuel was found guilty of second-degree murder, despite his parents' attempts to obtain a new trial. That possibility vanished during the sentencing hearing held a month later. On Monday, May 13, 2013, both parents, filled with emotion, implored the judge to reconsider the case. The mother repeated the defense's arguments. The judge, with kind words, commented that no parent should have to face what they had experienced, but given the seriousness of the crime, they could not evade the corresponding punishment. The judge imposed a sentence of 40 years in prison without parole. Elizabeth and Sam could not contain their sadness and expressed their anguish at a sentence they considered excessively long. Samuel apologized to his family and loudly admitted his mistakes, acknowledging that he could no longer change what had happened since. California Marie continues to face the process with a broken heart. Every time she looks at the serene San Diego Valley, she remembers someone who was more than a friend, a son that life gave her despite her sadness. She finds solace in the idea that despite everything, or was lucky enough to meet him and integrate him into her life and family. And so, dear viewer, we come to the end of today's crime story. I'd really like to know your opinion, so I encourage you to leave it in the video comments. Don't miss our next true crime video. Subscribe and activate the notification bell to stay up to date with the most shocking and chilling stories.